Most of the places where the finishing tapes on the wing go, you try to run the ends of them underneath another tape someplace so they're covered up, and to try to fix it so that the ends disappear somehow in there. These short rib tapes, that's not going to happen with those. They come out right to the middle of the wing, or right into the wing there, and they're going to be exposed on the end of them. So to make a little decoration there, what I've done on that is taken these tapes and just fold the end of it over a little bit and take pinking shears. It doesn't work quite as well on these tapes that aren't on this fabric that hasn't been sized. Anyway, just make a little end like that on the end of them, and I think I'm going to take some poly brush and brush the ends of those so that it makes a little neater end on them, cut them. But anyway, you make a little scallop like that, or a little curve like that, and it makes a little a nicer end, a more decorative end on those when they come in there. I get the finishing tapes run on the ribs along the length of the wing there, and I got those little ones on these diagonals. Well, I still have to figure out what I'm going to do with the tails where those hang over the false bars and the nose of the ribs, but I can do that after I get farther along here. I did make a couple of mistakes, and one of them was down there on that landing light assembly. I went ahead and run the tapes down all the way over the leading edge of the landing light assembly, and I still need to run doubler tapes, finish tapes around that perimeter of the landing light assembly. I started down on the top side of it, but I've got to go ahead and continue these tapes around the bottom side, and I've got to run a tape across there, and I want this tape to overlap those tapes so that there's no edges that are exposed. So I want everything, all the ends of these tapes to be covered up and stuff so that they don't tear loose or anything. So this tape here will come out across here, and I'm going to want this tape to cover it up. The same with these tapes, they'll come back here like that, and I want this tape to cover them up. Then this tape will come over around the leading edge and will be covered up with the leading edge tape. The other place that I did something similar was down there on the butt rib. I went ahead and put the tape down along the butt rib, but I want this seam tape, that this finish tape that goes over the spar, goes all the way down there to the butt rib, and I don't want a raw edge on it. I want it covered up, and I went ahead and glued that tape down all the way on the butt rib there. I got to thinking about it last night when I was supposed to be sleeping, and I saturated a paper towel with some MEK, and then I just put the paper towel over those tapes where I wanted to peel them back. Just let them sit there for a little bit. I didn't want to melt all of the poly brush underneath them or anything. I just wanted to loosen it up enough where I could pull that tapes off without tearing everything up. And that worked just perfect, and that didn't peel any of the poly brush off. It didn't tear anything up at all. So that worked perfectly on that. So now I can go ahead and finish putting my finishing tapes around the landing light assembly, and then when I get ready I can go ahead and run my tapes down the wing spars, and that end on the far end down there I can then cover it up with that butt rib tape. This end down here on the wing tip will be covered up by the leading edge tape when I get that far. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and go over all of these tapes that I've got glued down, all these things I've got glued down with the iron, and get them all smoothed out. And then we've got to go over them again with some more poly brush to glue them down. I got to trim up my pieces where they go over the trailing edge there, over the false bar, and get those cleaned up and tack down where they're going to go. Well, anyway, there's a lot of work to do here just ironing right now, so I got to get all this smoothed up, go over it with another coat of poly brush, and then smooth it up again. One of the things that I noticed before on that top, now some of the places the tape doesn't go down evenly all the way. There's a spot here, there's spots here along this one where the curve of the wing curves down and the tape doesn't go down flat, perfectly flat. So you get little spots pooched up on it. Well, those will iron down and you'll think they'll stay, but for some reason the poly brush goes away from those spots. It's around the edges here, but it doesn't flow underneath them. so they never do stick down right, even though we iron them down and melt the poly brush underneath it and try to get it to flow out. They never do flow out quite right. So what I do is I get some poly brush and just stick on those places and take my finger and just rub them in until it goes through the surface, and it'll actually penetrate down there and get down into the underlying poly brush underlying fabric and glue that down. They tell you in the book that they'll just go and clean up with the iron, but they don't all do that. Some of these places will, where they're up a little bit and stuff, but some of the places like here, there's a polybrush desert underneath there. There's a void underneath there, and you can feel it when you put your fingers across it. And they say that if you can feel it, you'll see it on the final coat. So a lot of this stuff will get covered up with the poly spray when it's put on, but it's still going to be there. It's going to show up as a divot or something, because it is a divot. Now these irons have a terrible tendency when you're doing this stuff to pick up poly brush, poly tack, whatever it is you happen to be trying to iron out, has to build up on the bottom of this iron until they become just about unusable. And scrape it off, use some MEK to soften it up, and some Scotch-Brite pads to clean it up and stuff like that, but you never get it perfectly clean. But I've got this high temperature Teflon tape, and I stuck on there to see how that would work, and that stuff seems to work really good. It makes it flow nice and smooth over that. It doesn't pick up any of the poly brush or poly tack for that matter. You can see maybe the brush marks and stuff on here alongside this tape, but when I go over it with the iron, those brush marks still look like they're there, but you can't feel them. And those edges of those tapes go right down into the mud there. So just keep doing this, just keep going all these spots. Like here where I had some drips and I wiped them out, there's brush marks there, and a little bit of a spot right there where it sticks up a little bit. You go over that with the iron, and that just blends right into the fabric. You got spots here where it might be a little thicker than other spots, and we just get those to blend right in. So we'll just keep doing that, going over all these tapes, every place. Any place there's a high spot or a wrinkle or anything like that that looks like a wrinkle, we'll just blend them right into the fabric. So this is going to take some time. Just got a lot of work to do here, so I'll just keep working on it and get all these tapes down. Let's see if we can get that one down there. Alright, that's looking like it's going to be okay. I might not even have to do any remedial work to that like I did the other side. I went over all those finishing tapes and the inspection cover, grommets and gussets and doilies and all of that fine stuff with the iron, and got them all pretty well smoothed out. Well, I'm going to get ready to put on the two finishing tapes for the wing spars, but first I was working a little bit on some of this other stuff. I cut off this finishing tape for this one rib, half rib, partial rib, whatever, cut it off a little bit short and put a scallop in it here, put a little curve in it here on the end. I put the doubler plate, the gusset here on the inboard flap hinge, and then run that over the top of it so it looks like it finishes it out nice. Did the same thing on this outboard flap hinge, although I didn't have to worry about a finishing tape matching up with it. Then I started working on finishing out these tapes here, mating them up on the false bars. And I started laying them out together, the two of them matching up together, and taking a pair of scissors and running through and trying to match the cut up on them. And that might have worked if I'd have done it before I glued those down, but they're glued down now, so you got to leave them out a little ways from the bottom to get the scissors under them, and they don't match up very well. And then I was starting to get some fraying on them and stuff. So I've come along on all of these and doped them up a little bit with some poly brush. This one here can just be trimmed off up here, That one doesn't have a mating one on it. But anyway, I doped these up with some polybrush to size them so that they'll cut neater. And I'll let that cure, and then we'll figure out a way to match those up a little better here when that sets up. And meanwhile, it's time to put in the finishing tapes here on the spars, and I'm running out of polybrush here. This is the last of the polybrush out of that one can, so I'm going to have to break open another can. Well, I've just drained out my little mixing container that I've been using into another container so I can mix a fresh batch of polybrush there, and then I can dump that one into the fresh batch after I get it mixed. Anyway, I gotta go dig out another can of polybrush. Oh, that's a gallon that I've used so far on this wing. I got the finishing tapes put on the wing spars yesterday. Now I split the tapes where the struts attach and kind of put a scallop on there. Just too much to try to fit around them. It's better to go ahead and split them into two pieces. And then I put another coat of polybrush on all of the other finishing tapes and stuff on there. And I put a little bit of polybrush, a thin bunch of polybrush on the tag ends here because I was trying to cut those off to glue those up, to finish those up, and it just wasn't cutting very nicely. So I just put a little bit on each one of those, so now today I can go on there, use the razor or scissors or something and make a nice trim cut on those so it doesn't get all frayed out. Well, right now I've got the iron heated up, and I'll go ahead and iron down those finish tapes on the spars and see if I need to touch up any of the rest of the finish tapes. And then I'll come along here, glue down these tag ends, and then I'll probably put another coat of polybrush on the spar tapes, and then I'll go do something else for a while. I finished up late yesterday afternoon with these, and then I went out and got a load of sand out to the sand pit. I didn't come out last night to do any work on this, let everything dry out or cure on this, because it's cool in here. It takes a while for everything to cure enough to work on it again. I don't want to try pushing it. But then I think my chemical mask must be wearing out because I wound up with a headache yesterday after I got finished and didn't feel like coming out yesterday evening and doing anything else. So I got new cartridges for my mask. I'll put a new cartridges on. Fumes aren't too bad when you're just doing little touch-up jobs and stuff like that, but when you put all of that polybrush on there and they're sitting over that for a couple hours or an hour at a time, that stuff gets pretty intense. So anyway, I've got my iron heated up. I'll go ahead and start ironing down those finish tapes again.